Let me ask you about the mission, because every time I see President Trump, he says this repeatedly, that the election was rigged in 2020. I mean, he says it all the time. We all know that. And it's almost getting lost because he says it so much. You've been at the FBI now 14 months. Have you done anything about that? And do you have anything to tell us about that?
Absolutely, Maria. Look, I've been with the president nearly since day one on this. As I told you earlier, I was the one that led the effort with folks like Trey Gowdy, Johnny Ratcliffe, and Devin Nunes to expose the corruption that tried to thwart President Trump's first presidential election run. And we saw the FISA abuses there. And I lived through it, and the media came at me then, too. That just shows you that when you're over the target, you keep pummeling the target because the media is going to try and pummel you. We are not going to take this and have not taken this laying down. We did already indict former Director Comey, and that's going through the judicial process. But we also, at this FBI, even though we uncovered what we uncovered back in the House Intel days, I had to come in here and find rooms that they hid from the world. I had to come in here and find access on our computer systems in restricted and prohibited case files that they purposely put in places for no one to see and find. We have found all this information. We are working with our Department of Justice partners, and I am never going to let this go, because they not only have personally attacked the presidency of the United States and President Trump, but they tried to thwart our elections and rig the entire system. And that is not something that is going to stop. That is not something I'm going to allow on my watch. But you just have to remember, they built this disease temple over 20 and 30 years. We've got all the evidence. I can announce on your show that we've got all the information we need. We're working with our prosecutors at the Department of Justice and their Attorney General Todd Blanche, and we are going to be making arrests. And it's coming, and I promise you, it's coming soon.
This is Democracy Watch, Mark. That was Kash Patel speaking with Maria Bartiromo, where he's hinting about the fact that there is an indictment that's going to be imminent related to election interference in 2020. Your reaction, first and foremost, to the prospect of an imminent arrest, something that's happening this week, under this bogus pretense that Donald Trump won the election and that it was rigged on behalf of the Democrats?
I mean, look, Kash Patel's trying to keep his job. So he's going on Maria Bartiromo, one of the leading places to go if you're a right-wing conspiracy theorist and election denier. And he is, claiming that, something's going to happen soon, their arrest soon, whatever it is. Here's the deal. Donald Trump cares more about election denialism than anything else. So if you're Kash Patel and you're trying to recover from, the devastating press coverage you've received, if you're Todd Blanche and you're trying to get the job that Pam Bondi lost, what you do is you feed the boss the meat he wants to eat, and it's going to be junk food, and it's not going to be good for him or anybody else, but that junk food is election denialism. It is lies. It is conspiracy theories. It is right-wing disinformation and misinformation spread about the 2016 election, the 2020 election, cockamamie theories about, deep state investigations of Donald Trump. And all of that right now is grinding away in a federal courthouse in Florida. So my reaction is, everybody who cares about democracy, you got to be paying attention in the weeks ahead, because there's the FBI director, seemingly sober, by the way, Brian. It's early in the morning with Maria Bartiromo. No reason why the FBI director wouldn't be sober. I'm just saying, seemed to be in his right mind. Talking about presumably stuff that the FBI director is not even supposed to be talking about, which is imminent pending investigations and imminent arrests. Right. But everybody needs to take this seriously. So please do me a favor and do what I do, which is I subscribe to this channel, because I get a lot of my news information analysis from what Brian talks to his guests on. He's got a great series with Glenn Kirshner, who covers particularly these criminal cases. So go ahead and subscribe to that right now.
And also, I would be crazy not to add that if you're not yet subscribed to Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting and election, all of this is covered relentlessly and quickly in Democracy Docket as well. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you want to help elevate Mark's voice in this ecosystem, that is the single best way to do so. Mark, is it better for these Trump lackeys to engage in this process that's going to, they're going to hit a wall at some point in this whole process? Is it better to engage in this stuff and fail if it means that Donald Trump gets, his momentary headline, as opposed to just not engaging in it at all and kind of saving themselves the embarrassment of, these kind of doomed or DOA prosecutions?
Yeah, I think what they have taken away is that if you don't give Donald Trump what he wants, if you don't indict completely innocent people, if you don't investigate people who have done nothing wrong other than serve their country, if you don't do those things, then what happens is you get fired. Yeah. And you get fired unceremoniously. I mean, Pam Bondi, everybody was, Pam Bondi this, Pam Bondi that. Pam Bondi disappeared off the face of the earth. I mean, she's been banished out of MAGA world unceremoniously. Same with Kristi Noem. I mean, when was the last time you heard anything about Kristi Noem other than, well, I'll leave that aside. I mean, you haven't heard a lot about Kristi Noem involving the Trump administration. She also has been banished out of MAGA world. So I think that if you're Todd Blanche, I think if you're the FBI director who, according to some reports, is on somewhat shaky ground, he might want to just keep himself steady on his 2 feet, walking straight, steady. Is on shaky ground with the White House. Then their immediate task is to head that off, and they think the way to do that is by proceeding with baseless, purely partisan, unethical criminal prosecutions. And look, Todd Blanche said it was the president's duty to go after his political enemies, and it was Todd Blanche said that everyone should be happy that he does that. So we know what Todd Blanche is going to do. And they just brought in this guy Joe diGenova, who was a U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. back in the 80s, and then turned into some kind of right-wing conspiracy theorist and, advocate for a whole bunch of lies involving, in benefit of Donald Trump. They brought him in, and so he's not being brought in to clear anyone in the grand jury that's apparently taking place in Eileen Cannon's court. So the writing's on the wall here. Who they're going to indict is not 100% clear. I got some ideas. But the baseline message everyone needs to realize is that this is an administration that is intent on going after Donald Trump's political opponents. And if you are one of those political opponents, that is something that has been baked in the cake for the last year. The only question is whether you stand proud and you stand tall, or whether you bow down and scrape and bend a knee. Too many of our largest institutions have chosen the latter path. Too many of our law firms have chosen the latter path. But there are still good, honorable people who are fighting for what is right and refusing to go down a corrupt path. So I think we're going to probably see what Kash Patel said, which is efforts to indict people. We'll see if the grand juries return indictments or not. But this should be a five-alarm fire for everybody. I mean, democracy's burning. And if we don't all take this seriously, it's going to burn to the ground, and the legacy media is not going to tell you anything about that. They're just going to roast marshmallows.
It's also worth noting that Kash Patel and Todd Blanche probably figure that even though these things are doomed anyway, even though there's probably no there, and they're not going to be able to find a judge who's going to validate any of this nonsense, that at the end of the day, it's better to have the judge say no than them, because Trump can then just vilify the judge. But they've already done their job. Like, Trump doesn't look at the success of these prosecutions as the indicator of whether they're doing a good job. He looks at the fact that they've just done it, that they're getting caught trying. And then the person that can be vilified at the end of this is the attorneys or the judge or the courts or the jury, whoever it may be. But as long as his sycophants, his mouthpieces, do their part in all of this, which is to bring these prosecutions in the first place, it seems, judging from the past, that's really what Trump is looking for.
Look, I mean, let's be clear. They have moved through an evolution here of investigating people who were not guilty of anything, to trying to indict people who were not guilty, and getting indictments, and then, as you say, having the judges stand in the way, to having grand juries themselves just refuse to issue and return indictments at all. And we've seen that in Virginia. We've seen that in Washington, D.C. Most notably, we've seen, as you say, people get acquitted. What's really important for people to pay attention here, and what should be really sending up a warning flare for everyone who cares about democracy, is that they have corrected for those things. They are investigating this grand conspiracy that doesn't exist in Florida, in a courthouse where Judge Eileen Cannon is the only judge who hears cases. So that doesn't mean that they're going to pull this off. It doesn't mean that the grand jurors will return an indictment. It doesn't mean that Judge Cannon will approve it. But Brian, let's be honest, they are trying to improve their odds in every way possible, right? They've replaced career prosecutors, including in that office. Joe DeGeneres is going there because a career prosecutor just resigned or was fired. I don't know which, but they're doing everything they can to try to stack the odds against justice and against right and what's right, and really just weaponizing, using every tool available. I hope that the criminal justice system works out fairly in this case, but there's no guarantees. And so, like, all of us just need to be aware of that. Like, there is no certainty that at the end of all of this, at the end of Donald Trump's term, that justice prevails. There is no guarantee that in this era that we look back and the rule of law prevailed. There is no guarantee that we look back after the 2026 midterms and after the 2028 elections and say that free and fair elections prevailed. The notion that this is all preordained in that the good guys win and democracy has prevailed and innocent don't get dragged through the mud and don't go through a criminal process and get convicted for crimes they didn't commit. That's not a sure thing. That only happens if all of us pay attention. It only happens if the powerful and the people with the most ability to affect things are willing to stand tall. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing a lot of them bend the knee and bow down and suck up to Donald Trump. So there's no guarantee this all works out the way it should. I know you are committed to doing everything you can, which is why you're such an important voice, which is why I always tell people to subscribe to your channel, whether they're listening to me or they're listening to you or your guests or listening to Glenn or any of the other commentators you have on. I try to do my part by litigating in court and also by just standing up and speaking out. I started Democracy Docket as a platform to speak out that would be uncompromising in its perspective. But again, like, we can all do our part, and that's not a guarantee. But I can promise you this: if the people watching this video don't do their part, it's going to be a lot harder. So, like I said, please subscribe to this channel.
Mark, why is it so important for Trump to continue to perpetuate this narrative that the election was stolen? Something tells me that, and I presume you're in the same boat here, that it's not just about massaging his ego. This isn't just about relitigating 2020 for the sake of making Trump feel like his protests about 2020 are somehow valid. I'm sure this has something to do with the future. And so why is it so important? Why is Trump dedicating so many resources, so much time and energy and money and personnel into proving this already completely disproven claim that there was a fraud in a past election?
Yeah, so I think that's really smart because it isn't just about the past. The seizure of the ballots in Fulton County was not just about 2020. It's about 2026 and 2028. The efforts that we've seen very recently to try to get ballots from Wayne County, Michigan, same thing. They may want the ballots from 2024, but they know there are important Senate and gubernatorial races going on.
Even right here in California, Chad Bianco tried to take 650,000 ballots.
Absolutely, the 650,000 ballots seized in California, right? This is not about just litigating the past and soothing Donald Trump's ego. It is about intimidating people to prevent them from standing up against him, right? So part of these indictments are just that. It's just sending a warning sign to people who stand up against Donald Trump that if you're inclined to do so, you could wind up like the folks who are getting who he goes after. But the second thing is he wants to undermine the results of the free and fair elections that we should be having. He wants to make sure that he and his party and his preferred candidates win elections. And Brian, one of the mistakes I think that we made in the Biden era, I mean, I wasn't in the Biden administration. You and I talked a lot about it at the time. We were complimentary where it was appropriate, and we were critical where it was appropriate. And one of the places where we were appropriately critical is that, the Biden administration just wanted to move on from the first Trump era and think that they could just course correct as if it was, they could go back and say, you know what, it's 2015 again. And we'll just like act like the Trump administration never existed. And we can never do that again. Like, we're going to eventually get through this period, and we can never do it again. And, for people who don't know, Brian has written an important new book on this very topic about how we move forward, what it looks like on the other side of this, when we get through all of this, and how Democrats need to be in a different posture, how the pro-democracy movement, frankly, needs to be in a different posture. We can do better than going back to 2015. I promise you, it wasn't that great. We can do better in voting than going back to 1965. Like, we should be able to advance new laws and new policies and new approaches and new structures of government that take into account what Donald Trump did and does not act like what he did was just some aberrational blip that we will never see again. I wrote the foreword to this book. It's the first time I've ever written a foreword to any book. So please, what you can do right now is you can pre-order the book. I've read it. It's excellent, but you can't read it yet. You have to pre-order it for when it comes out. And the link for that is in the descriptions of this episode. If all things being equal, go to an independent bookstore. But honestly, it's more important that you buy the book than where you get it from. So if you're an Amazon person, you have my permission, buy it from Amazon.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to put the link to that book, which is titled The Day After, right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. And again, I'm going to put the link to Democracy Docket right here on the screen. If you're not yet signed up, please help elevate Mark's voice in this ecosystem. Please help support his work in the courts, ground zero, where it matters most, where he's litigating nearly 100 cases in most of the states around the country. So that is a small step that everybody could take to show some support for the work that he's doing on a daily basis. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.
The dichotomy used to be, well, I don't like the mean tweets, but the economy's good. Or I don't like Trump the person, but I like his policies. And now They don't like Trump the person or his policies at the moment.
No.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Focus Group podcast. I'm Sarah Longwell, publisher of The Bulwark.